Well, Mark Devlin is actually a researcher and DJ from the UK, and he focuses on mind control in the entertainment industry, which really interests me as somebody coming from a counterculture perspective. He has a number of lectures out that, I was personally really impressed by. He got into everything from, some of the Laurel Canyon PSYOPs. Hello?
Yeah, the Laurel Canyon PSYOPs. And what else? We're introducing our speaker, folks, if you're just tuning in, Mark Devlin. He'll be at the conference, and he'll be joining us in just a second. Continue, John, with his introduction.
Yeah, so he had a number of recent presentations that he did overseas about, the mind control that takes place in the entertainment industry. And he got really deep into, specific examples. I don't want to give too much of his presentation away, but I believe we're probably going to talk about some of them aspects a little bit later on when we bring him on.
All right, let's go ahead.
Basically, that's his main area of research is mind control. In the
you got me. You had me on mind control in the entertainment industry. What sexier of a topic can you get than that? Let's go ahead and go to the other side of the pond and speak with Future for Your Mind presenter Mark Devlin. Welcome to the broadcast.
Hey, thanks for having me on. Good to be here.
Yeah, we're glad to have you. And this is the first time I'm getting a chance to learn about your work. John highly recommended it, and he showed me a couple lectures. But you know what? I'd rather hear from the horse's mouth himself at the conference, not to say that I won't spend some time catching up on stuff eventually. But, Mark, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and explain how you got into this kind of stuff?
Okay, well, I'm the token English guy that you got on, so I'm going to be saying bloody a lot and making references to cups of tea and things like that,
Fair enough. That sounds good.
Yeah, I've been a DJ for the last 25 years, a club and radio DJ. And for the first 20 years of that, I just kind of went through the motions and did what was expected of DJs and played the music and took the records that are being serviced to me by record companies and didn't really give any thought to the nature of the stuff that I was playing and didn't give any thought to the idea there could be an agenda going on with the music. And in 2010, I woke up, to coin a phrase, underwent a conscious awakening, and that was the tail end of a process that had been going on for a couple of years. And it was as a result of doing a lot of reading, doing a lot of research, and just musing and reflecting on the big questions in life. And I reached a point where so many things just came together and started to make sense to me. And I started to look at the world and the nature of reality in a totally different way. And, my life is divided into two halves, really, up to 2010 and since then, because nothing is the same. And I gradually started to assimilate what I'd come to understand about what's really going on in the world and what this world really is, what this reality really is. And my specialist area of interest was how this relates to the music scene and specifically the sort of music that I was involved in playing. And for the past 4 years plus, I've been researching that area, and that is what I now talk about and what I get into in talks and radio shows and such. And really, all the things that are going to be covered at Free Your Mind can be found in a sort of like a microcosm of the whole thing in the music industry, because we have trauma-based mind control present there. We have issues of human freedom there. We have issues relating to sort of New World Order, Illuminati conspiracy stuff going on there. So everything that's going to be discussed at the conference can be kind of whittled down and applied to what happens in the music game. And that, some of that is what I want to bring to the conference in terms of my contribution.
Very good, very good. Now, we know that at a certain age mark, some of the programming for these stars starts to break. Will you describe that process to us?
Yeah, I'm not really sure what the time period is in terms of when it might start to wear off, but certainly there have been some examples, or what appear to be some examples of mind control programming wearing off. And probably the best known one, the best example of it, is the meltdown that Britney Spears had a good few years ago.
Right.
When she famously shaved her head, went into this barber shop and started making comments about she's got to get these things out of her head. And, she started attacking cars with umbrellas. And this made the headlines, the mainstream headlines, and everyone was just looking at it as if, oh, Britney's gone a bit crazy. What is it with these celebrities? They've got all this fame and fortune and all this money, and they just go a little crazy. I mean, what do they want out of life? And nobody really in the mainstream gets to the crux of what the problem may be. And when you see behavior like that, it does tend to be a classic sign of mind control programming breaking down. Another example was Justin Bieber when he came to the UK a couple of years ago. He was doing some shows in London, and he started behaving very strangely. He went out in a gas mask. He was photographed many times wearing a gas mask. He was turning up late for shows. He was babbling incoherently on stage. And people were saying the same thing, what is it with these kids? They're just so crazy. And you've had Lindsay Lohan as well, who used to make the headlines a lot, the actress. And it's the same sort of behavior that we see all the time, the same sort of traits. And it does seem to be the case that at some point, the programming does start to wear off, and these celebrities have to be recalled and put back in the lab and presumably have the programming topped up. Because what we had with Britney Spears was there was a period where after the head shaving incident, she was out of the limelight, and a while later, she's kind of relaunched, rejuvenated career, and we get the new Britney. And it just smacks of, she's been reprogrammed and got back on track, and she's now ready to go back out into the public and do her thing. Another example, going way back to 2001, was Mariah Carey. And there were headlines in that year about her having a meltdown, a nervous breakdown, and attempting suicide. And again, we didn't hear from her for quite a few months after that. And then before you know it, she's back with a new album and a new image and a new look, and she's back doing the chat shows and all the rest of it.
I wonder, Mark, if I can just interject for a moment. I wonder about Mariah Carey, because I'm actually friends with her brother.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and he's I say I'm friends. I should more aptly say we're acquaintances. But we've talked quite a bit, and he is a chemtrail activist, believe it or not.
Wow, okay.
And he is very much a part of the free your mind culture, if you will. I ought to ask him about that sometime, because I would love to hear an insider's perspective on that. Maybe Mariah Carey was a part of that, and we could get him to come out and tell us more about what had happened there anonymously. So that would be great. That's interesting.
If he would, yeah. With Mariah Carey, there's all kinds of visual clues. There's often symbolic clues that get placed in the work of these artists. We can get on to Nicki Minaj. Nicki Minaj is a textbook example of so many of the symbols that get placed to provide clues to the presence of mind control.
Did Mariah Carey not have a Butterfly album or song?
Well, exactly, yeah. What I was going to say was that there's this division of MK Ultra, which people may be familiar with, which is known as monarch programming.
Monarch, like the monarch butterfly, right?
Exactly, and it's symbolized by the monarch butterfly. And it's surprising the amount of times you see monarch butterflies cropping up in album sleeves and videos and photo shoots. And with Mariah Carey, she did indeed have an album called Butterfly, and there are many photo shoots where she's pictured with monarch butterflies, these very distinctive orange-colored butterflies. And, Fritz Springmeier gets into this, and Freeman has talked about it as well. The monarch butterfly is symbolic of this particular brand of mind control. It's supposed to, on one level, represent the metamorphosis that sort of happens when the subject goes from one state of mind to another, symbolizing the butterfly coming out of the chrysalis, And also, I think it was Fritz Springmeier that told me the monarch butterfly has this ability to retain information from generation to generation and pass it on genetically.
Well, with Fukushima being an issue, there's all sorts of talk of these butterflies being the first to show some serious signs because of their regeneration span, if you will. Mark, let me just interject for just a moment. We're going to be speaking with Fritz Springmeier in a little bit. It's the Free Your Mind Conference fundraiser. It's our radio marathon. Thank you to UCY Radio for helping us put this on. We are asking for people to help to afford this conference, and if you can go to the website and donate, for $20 or more, you'll get a Free Your Mind poster. For $40 or more, you'll get a Free Your Mind t-shirt exclusive, one of a kind, only for this marathon. You won't see these designs again. For $75 or more, you'll get a Free Your Mind t-shirt and a poster. For $150 or more, you'll get the Mark Passio What on Earth is Happening ARC drive, more than a terabyte. Is that correct, John? Did I get it right that time? Hope so. More than a terabyte. Terabyte. Say that 5 times fast. Of Mark Passio's ARC drive. And for $200 or more, you'll get all of the aforementioned gifts. So please donate if you can. We need all the Federal Reserve notes we can. Having a conference like this is very expensive. Even when we are cutting as many corners as we possibly can, we still need to help the Federal Reserve notes, love them or hate them, the mind control pieces of paper, help make this Free Your Mind conference go on. And we want to thank you ahead of time for donating to the cause. Or buy your ticket. If you haven't bought your ticket yet, please go buy your ticket. Even if you're on the fence about actually being there, buy a ticket. You can do that at the Free Your Mind Conference website as well. Mark Devlin joins us again. He'll be a speaker at the conference. Mark, I want to ask you a little bit about the idea that the Disney children, you mentioned Britney Spears. I guess there's other examples. Lindsay Lohan, I believe, was a Disney child. There seems that for whatever reason, the magical world of Disney has all of these children stars coming out of it that are pretty much textbook examples of this sort of mind control victim that you speak of.
That's right. Disney has been certainly a breeding ground for many of these mind-controlled artists. Disney is a satanic organization by nature, which people are so shocked to hear for the first time, because the cover story, the front of what Disney is all about, is so very different to its true nature. But when you start doing the research and really getting into it, you find the true nature of the Disney Corporation. There's a clue in the logo where the 3 6s are hidden. But the Mickey Mouse Club, which came out of Disney, has spawned quite a number of artists who went on to become prominent players. And in the same year, in the Mickey Mouse Club, you had Britney Spears, Justin Timberlake, and Christina Aguilera. And they all kind of graduated at the same time, and they all went on to break through as prominent pop music artists at the same time. And, we discussed Britney Spears. Justin Timberlake is very much down with the agenda, as has been Christina Aguilera. And more recently, we've had another graduate who is Miley Cyrus, who was originally Hannah Montana, this very wholesome...
Oh, I think I've heard of her before.
Yeah, just once or twice. So she started out as this wholesome sort of nice girl next door that nobody minded their kids watching, because it was all good American, values and all of that. But a couple of years ago, whenever it was, we've seen this very distinct change in image and approach of Miley Cyrus, and gone is the innocent, nice, squeaky clean Hannah Montana, and now you've just got this, slut basically up on stage, behaving in hedonistic, outrageous ways. And what would have happened is there would have been a fan base of young kids, mainly young girls, that would have come to know Miley Cyrus through her Hannah Montana identity, and they would have been swept along with her in her career, and they're now witnessing her displaying this kind of outrageous, promiscuous behavior on stage, and in the video to Wrecking Ball and stuff. And her recent stage antics involved her performing fellatio on a blow-up doll. And, I think we can be quite concerned about the fact that young girls are watching all this stuff and are being indoctrinated with this program that's clearly in place. And it's just another example
What's
of an
the
artist
goal, Mark?
the Disney Corporation, and some of the stuff that goes on.
What's the goal here, though? Why is there this push to, you mentioned the sexualization of little girls and so on. What's the goal here?
I think it's just corrupting humanity and corrupting spirituality and corrupting the natural human condition. It's natural for young people, children, to be given the time to develop ordinarily and naturally and organically in life, and to go through the stages that are necessary to build you up to be a responsible, mature adult. And that involves being given time to breathe in your childhood and, being given time for things to happen naturally. And I think the intention is to sexualize kids at an ever earlier age, just to corrupt that natural development and to corrupt the true human spiritual condition. It's just part of a grand plan. And you come to realize that the individuals that are controlling the entertainment business are connected to individuals that are running every other aspect of daily human life. Governments and the military and the academic educational establishments and all the rest of it. It's all connected at the end of the day, as I'm sure many of your listeners have come to realize. And the plan is just to lock down humanity and cut them off from their true spiritual nature and prevent them from discovering what their true nature is. And they're just into all methods of debasing and degrading humanity. And this is just one aspect that they've hit upon, one way of doing it, using the entertainment industry for that purpose, and just not missing out on the wonderful opportunity that the entertainment business, the music game, Hollywood movies, the television business offer for mass mind control and social engineering. They've been doing it forever, and they're very good at it.
Right. Mark, tell me about your first-hand experience being a DJ over there in the UK with this sort of mind control and the culture of the entertainment industry.
Well, really, the only first-hand experience I've had of it is as a DJ, just watching what happens with regards to things that people say to DJs in clubs, which might sound quite trivial, but I was thinking about this quite recently, and it's quite telling, the sort of dumb stuff that people say when they come up to DJs. And I wrote a book a few years ago called Tales from the Flip Side, and it's before I woke up, and it's an unconscious book in that sense. It's just me relating a whole bunch of anecdotes from my years as a DJ. But there was a chapter in there talking about DJ requests. And people just say the dumbest things when they come up to DJs. They just say stuff like, can you play something we can dance to? Can you play something with a bit of a beat? If you play such and such a tune, everyone will dance. And, these are really moronic comments for people to make. But it's just struck me in recent times that the sort of things that people say to DJs in clubs are very indicative of the level of mass mind control that's being done on the public by the entertainment business. People will only dance to records by certain artists now. This is something that I've had this conversation with many other DJs, and we all observe this same factor. People only dance and only respond to records by certain artists, so it's got to be the new tune by Beyonce or Jay-Z or Rihanna or something like that. If it's not an artist, if it's an artist they've not heard of, they don't want to know about it. People will come up and ask for a record 50 times in a night just because it's been on heavy MTV rotation that particular week, or it's been record of the week on Radio 1 or something like that. And you come to realize that people just aren't thinking for themselves. They're responding absolutely to the agenda that's been laid out by the corporations, and they're just towing the line in terms of doing what everybody else does and asking for what everybody else is asking for. We saw an example of how easy it is to mind control large numbers of people this year with the Ice Bucket Challenge back in the summer, which was a big craze in the UK as well as in the US and everywhere else. And you had all these pointless Z-list celebrities chucking a bucket of ice water over their heads and probably not even understanding where the money was supposed to be going for, that people were raising for it. They didn't really understand the cause behind it. But it's just an ego-driven thing. People thought it was a great idea to throw a bucket of water over their head because some celebrity was doing it and make a YouTube video of it and get all your friends to watch it and have a laugh. And we've also had, in recent weeks, Black Friday here in the UK. Now, I know folks in the US will be more than familiar with the moronic behaviour that happens on Black Friday and the mind control that is seen to be at work there. But it seems to have become a UK phenomenon now as well in the last couple of years. And we had the same scenes over here a couple of weeks ago where people were, scrabbling to get to the store first and camping out all night so they could be first in line when the store opens and beating each other up to steal things out of their shopping trolleys because somebody got the last one off the shelf. And you see all these ways in which people are mind controlled so easily. And you think, if only they could be mind controlled towards doing something, or if only they could be coerced towards doing something that actually benefits humanity in some way, that is actually positive or meaningful in some way, instead of chucking a bucket of water over your head or trying to get that can opener with 50% off. And, there are so many examples of the way people are having their thoughts dictated to them without even realizing what's going on. So, yeah, the DJ request thing is the only first-hand experience I've had of that. I consider myself fortunate in many ways in that I never signed any kind of contract with any corporation in my career. I've always been self-employed and independent and done things my own way. And this is a very beneficial thing, you come to realize, because when you look into the nature of the business and what happens to somebody when they sign a contract with one of these corporations as either an artist or maybe a television presenter or a radio DJ or something like that, you realize that you are signing your soul away, effectively. So I consider myself very fortunate that I never went down that route.
Mark, I want to ask you a little bit about your background. Do you make your living from being a DJ?
Well, I did for many years, up until pretty much the point that I mentioned, 2010. At that point, I realized that, I gradually came to realize that I could no longer go on doing some of the gigs that I've been doing and playing some of the music that I've been playing up to that point. Being that I was starting to speak out about the stuff that's going on in the industry, it wouldn't have been a great idea. It would have been quite hypocritical of me to continue to provide a platform for this music. So that kind of had to get scaled down and looked at and addressed. And I've now taken a driving job, like a day job, to pay the bills because
Sure.
the bills need to be paid. So I now do a regular kind of job which takes care of the bills that need to be paid, and that enables me to now do my research and produce my podcasts and do my talks and such for effectively no income. It's just it needs to be done.
I hear you. That sounds like this conference and what John and I do on a regular basis.
You know the way.
Yep, exactly. Yeah. Folks, we're talking with Mark Devlin. He'll be speaking at the Free Your Mind Conference in 2015, April 10th, 11th, and 12th. Of course, we have our donations that we're asking for you to help as little as possible, but if you can donate 20 or more, we'll give you the exclusive Free Your Mind poster. 50 or more or 40 or more, we'll give you the T-shirt. If you can donate 75 or more, we'll give you the T-shirt and the poster. If you can donate 150 or more, we'll give you the ARC drive from Mark Passio, and for $200 or more, we'll give you everything. Sound good? All right, thank you so much for your help ahead of time here. And if you haven't got your ticket yet, what are you waiting for? There's going to be some awesome discussion. We'll tell you a little bit about the open mic section of the conference. We're looking forward to that. Of course, Dennis McKenna will be speaking. Stuart Swearlow has been added. We have a roundtable featuring Luke Radowski, the Anti-Media, the Free Thought Project, which you'll hear from next on the broadcast. And they're definitely in the news right now with all of this discussion of cop killing and whatnot. The Free Thought Project has been cited several times, and we're going to talk to the founders of the Free Thought Project. Of course, myself and John have been working with the Free Thought Project over the last few months, and you definitely want to check that out. So that's coming up in a little bit. Then we'll talk with Fritz Springmeier for a bit. We'll talk with Mark Passio, hopefully, coming up. Derek Brose, who's writing a book with John G. Vibes. We'll talk to him. We'll also listen to an interview with Stuart Swerlow from Catherine Buckalow. And we got a lot coming up. A lot of surprises, maybe some surprised guests. You'll have to stay tuned to find out. And again, if you can help donate, that's why we're here. In part, but the real reason why we're here, folks, is because of the information. And this information being presented at a venue like the Free Your Mind Conference is such an awesome experience. I can't rant and rave enough. If you are fortunate enough to get there in person, anybody can watch these talks on YouTube afterwards. The information will be vital to absorb and to learn from, whether it's at the day of the conference or afterwards. But there's something about the camaraderie, about the social nature, about the meeting of the minds, if you will, the vibe, for lack of a better term, that is going to be a part of this conference. It's just amazing. Absolutely amazing. So there we go. A little bit of a plug there. Get that administrative stuff out of the way. Now we're going to go back to Mark Devlin. John, you want to talk with Mark for a little bit? I'm sure you have a bunch of questions for him. John, Good Vibes, of course,
yeah,
sure. Organizer. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first off, I saw in one of your talks you got a little bit into the mystery surrounding Laurel Canyon, and that's something that I started to delve into a couple of years ago, and have found really interesting. I haven't done any work on it myself, and there really isn't a whole lot of research out there on the subject. So aside from what that one gentleman did, which his name's escaping me right now, but I know that you know it. But aside from some of that, there really hasn't been much out there. So I'm curious to hear what you've been able to dig up on that particular case.
Yeah, well, this is largely the work of Dave McGowan. I think that's the guy you're thinking of, an author by the name of Dave McGowan. Yeah, he brought out a book this year called Weird Scenes Inside the Canyon. And what I talk about in my public talks is basically relating the information that Dave McGowan's put across. And he spent a lot of time looking into backgrounds of many of the artists that were key to the counterculture, anti-establishment hippie era in the sort of mid to late 60s. And many people assume that the hippie movement pretty much grew up out of San Francisco. The Haight-Ashbury area of San Francisco is where it's all considered to have started. But McGowan's pointed out that actually there's this small neighborhood in Los Angeles called Laurel Canyon, and an astonishing number of the key artists from that era happen to have congregated and made music and lived together communally in this particular area of Laurel Canyon. It had absolutely no musical history prior to around about 1965. And you can look into many of the artists that emerged out of there after that point. And you have the Doors, you have the Mamas and the Papas, Love featuring Arthur Lee, Frank Zappa and the Mothers of Invention, Jim Myers, the Byrds, and a whole bunch of other artists. And McGowan did a lot of digging away into the family backgrounds of the prominent group members. And he discovered that in almost every case, without exception, the families, particularly the fathers of these prominent artists, came from either the U.S. government, various departments within the U.S. government, the military, or the Secret Service and intelligence services in some capacity. And this leads to the very interesting reflection as to how organic and grassroots that whole hippie counterculture movement may have been, versus whether it may have been cynically manipulated and puppeteered by these various government agencies and military agencies and such. And there's some fascinating examples of what the families were involved in. I think Frank Zappa's father was involved in chemical or biological warfare in some way. But the most amazing example is when you get down to Jim Morrison of the Doors. And it turns out that his father was Admiral George Stephen Morrison, who just happens to have been the U.S. naval commander, was on deck at the time of the Gulf of Tonkin incident, or non-incident, that springboarded America into the Vietnam War. So you've got the Doors and Jim Morrison, who are always perceived in terms of their image as being very anti-war and anti-establishment and, counterculture and all of that. And you've got the fact that Morrison's father was this U.S. naval commander. And, of course, Jim Morrison is one of the famous members of the 27 Club, which is this group of musicians that just happened to have died at the age of 27. There's so many of them through rock history. You've got Jim Morrison, Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, Kurt Cobain, Robert Johnson going way back, Amy Winehouse quite recently. So Jim Morrison...
Let's go down that rabbit hole for a minute, because that's something that I've always been fairly interested in. Have you looked into that a lot?
I don't really know what the significance of the 27 is, to be honest. We do know that the forces that control the entertainment business are obsessed with numbers, with numerology, as they are with occultism and symbolism and such. I'm sure there is some occult meaning behind the 27, but I'm not entirely sure what that would be. But it does seem to go beyond the realms of coincidence that all the artists just happen to have died at the age of 27.
Have you noticed any other connection between the specific artists? Like, as for an example, as the connections are at Laurel Canyon, where they all had family in certain branches of the military and things like that. Did you notice any connections between the members of Club 27?
Not really, to be honest. As I say, this is drawing on McGowan's work, which goes into in his book, and before that it was a web series. But I recall him saying that once the movement had been put into place, the artists very quickly moved out of the Laurel Canyon area, and everything kind of dissipated. And it's had no sort of musical heritage since, other than the nostalgic aspect of looking back to this era. He also points out that there was a big military research facility that just happened to be situated in Laurel Canyon, close to where all these artists were congregating. So, of course, the suggestion here is that this whole music movement and these artists were put into place as part of a blueprint, as part of a plan, in order to disengage young people at that time from being politically active and from opposing the Vietnam War too vocally, and just disengaging them from activism of any sort in this very crucial time period. And this was the era, of course, when LSD, acid, was coming onto the scene, and large numbers of young people were being sort of led down the path of turning on, tuning in, and dropping out, just dropping acid and chilling out and free love and all that sort of thing.
Sure.
And the suggestion there is that countered any kind of activism that may otherwise have been taking place among this generation.
Exactly,
So
and that's why we want to be careful with our endorsement of entheogens. We are going to have Dennis McKenna, of course, Terrence McKenna, and his brother, and a researcher in his own right, at the conference. And obviously, we are very much interested in studying entheogens and their potential downfalls and their potential, uses for enlightenment, whether it be cannabis as a mind-freeing tool or a mind-quashing tool. It's kind of a double-edged sword. You want to speak on entheogens for a bit and kind of talk on that?
Just to...
Can I interject for a moment, too?
No.
Yeah, for sure.
I just wanted to, it's a second what Bob was saying, and I personally get into the work on entheogens a lot, and I believe that it's a very strong and powerful tool. But as Bob said, like any tool, it's a double-edged sword, and there needs to be a responsible and knowledgeable use of these substances.
Sure.
And as Mark was alluding to earlier, that wasn't the case in the 60s with the hippie movement. It was largely disrespected, and that, once again, as we were saying, can take a dangerous turn. Mark, did you want to comment on any of that?
Well, yeah, I mean, I back up what you're saying there, co-sign that. I can't really put it any better myself. I just wanted to mention the fact that I'm currently researching and writing a book, which is going to be called Musical Truth. It's a hell of a job. I don't expect it to be ready for at least a year. I've had a few days off recently, actually, a bit of downtime, so I've been absolutely diving into the writing of this and the researching. And one of the big areas that I'm getting into, as we're talking about the 1960s and LSD and all of that, is the story of the Beatles, which is absolutely fascinating when you truly get into it. And this is something that I've also touched on in some of my public talks. And there's this very common conspiracy theory, you might say, or myth surrounding Paul McCartney, which people might be familiar with. The whole subject area is known in the scene as PID, or Paul is Dead. And it's this suggestion that the real Paul McCartney was, died in 1966, and his place was taken by an imposter who has been impersonating him ever since. And, of course, this sounds absolutely ridiculous and impossible when you first hear it, or certainly when you hear it in the form of a soundbite like that. But when you actually get down to some of the fine detail and some of the evidence and some of the forensic evidence to suggest that an imposter may have taken his place, suddenly it takes on a life of its own, particularly when you approach it with an open mind and without any kind of belief system to defend. And this is something that I've really been delving into. And, I'll probably bring this up in the conference as well, because it really does seem to pique people's interest. And there seem to be two versions of this story. And the first one is this idea that it's supposed to have been on the 9th of November 1966, and the way we express dates in the UK, the 9th of November would be 9/11, because we do it in reverse to, you American guys. So that would have been a very early showing for 9/11/66, and the idea is that Paul McCartney got into a massive argument with the other Beatles during a recording session, and he's supposed to have got into his car, an Aston Martin convertible, and stormed off, and he was involved in a car accident and tragically killed. And the Beatles management worked to quickly cover this up, because they panicked and they realized that they couldn't let this become public knowledge, and they just happened to find somebody to take the place of McCartney. This is clearly ridiculous, because that's the trouble with doubles, really. There's never one around when you need one that's fully trained and musically gifted and all of that. But the second variation on the story is the one that carries some plausibility, I would suggest, which is that the original McCartney was deliberately taken out for whatever reason, and that there'd been a long period of preparation to bring in somebody to take his place. Again, I fully accept when you come across this story for the first time, it sounds absurd, but I've been delving into some of the clues that researchers have found in Beatles records, in the sonics and in the lyrics, and some of the many symbolic clues that are supposed to have been planted in the record sleeves and in pictures. And there's somewhere around 400 of these clues that people have identified as giving an indication of what may have gone on. And one thing I have come to understand through my research over the past 4 years or so is that the forces that control the entertainment business are absolutely obsessed with occultic practices, the dark occult, and secret society activity. And they also seem to feel the need to place indicators of what they've done or what they plan to do encoded in works of in public works, whether it's records or TV programs or movies or such. They seem to feel the need to communicate what they're doing in a very cryptic way for those that can see and interpret it. And when you put all those things together, and you also understand that these dark forces are into ritual sacrifice as well when it suits them, suddenly this whole suggestion doesn't sound so preposterous. I did want to mention that because it's one that really does seem to spark people's interest.
That's fascinating. I've definitely never heard that one before, and that's something I definitely want to look into. Do you believe that, I guess, like them and many of these other artists you believe are probably heavily controlled by their management? Do you want to speak to that dynamic as far as handlers and management and maybe how things like that might work?
Yeah, well, this feeds back into the whole trauma-based mind control thing, MK Ultra and Monarch programming and such. And it turns out, all the evidence suggests that many of your favorite artists are, in fact, have undergone mind control programs, and they do have handlers appointed in each case who are there to kind of keep an eye on them and make sure that they behave in the expected way and make sure they stick with the program and to spot any signs of the programming wearing off, such as we mentioned earlier. And another thing that I've come to discover is that when an artist signs a contract in exchange for fame and fortune, the price that they have to pay for that is unbelievably heavy. They are literally selling their souls. And people use that phrase in a very throwaway kind of way, a very lightweight sort of way. But I've come to realize that the concept of selling your soul is actually a very real thing, because what's happening is you are giving over your very life force to these parasitic corporations. And the point at which you do that is the point at which they consider they own you. They literally own your ass, and they can do whatever they want with it. And it's something that happens when people sign up to the military and various government agencies, the intelligence services and various government departments. You sign a contract in that context, and your life is no longer your own. And that's what we see in the entertainment business as well. And they seem to take it all the way, in that not only can they do whatever they want with you because they control you now, because you've given over your very self to them, but they also seem to take that as a green light for taking you out whenever it suits them, because they see you as their property. And so in the music business, over the decades, we've seen so many artists that have met untimely deaths at a very young age in very suspicious circumstances. You could take that way back to the days of Jim Morrison and Jimi Hendrix. And then moving on, you've got all kinds of suspicious circumstances surrounding Bob Marley, John Lennon, more recently Michael Jackson, Whitney Houston. The common denominator in all these cases is that there are so many discrepancies and anomalies and more questions than answers that you've got to wonder whether this is going on. And, I do draw these parallels between the entertainment business and the military and government departments, because in all these cases it seems that you sign your very life over to the forces that control these entities.
Absolutely. We're talking with Mark Devlin. It's the Free Your Mind fundraiser. Please donate if you can at the Free Your Mind Conference website. Anything can help. And we are giving away some prizes. I'll go over that. Gifts, I should say, in response to you and your donations. I'll go over that in just a moment before we introduce the Free Thought Project. We're going to let Mark go here in just a second. But Mark, let me tell you, we're so glad to have you. I know you're taking a long trip and you're doing this on a volunteer basis, and we really appreciate you being a part of this conference. I don't know that I can understate that, or I should say overstate that. Mark Devlin is his name, folks. He'll be at the Free Your Mind conference once again. Mark, let me ask you before we let you go, what's up with the UK and your obsession with the Queen, man? It's like the Kim Kardashian type obsession we have here, but for you guys, it's for the royal family.
Yeah, it's absolutely unbelievable. And we've got the Queen's Christmas message coming up in a few days, which is this annual tradition at 3 p.m. on Christmas Day. The two main prominent channels in the UK screen the Queen's Christmas message. And, you know, it's obviously written by somebody else and it's recorded in October or something. And it's just unbelievable that people still gather around the TV set and pay any attention to what this entity is talking about. And, you know, folks over there might be familiar with the scandal that we've had over here running for a couple of years with regards to institutionalized paedophilia, child abuse. It all started with the outing of this BBC DJ and TV presenter called Jimmy Savile. And he died at the age of 85 or something in, I think it was 2011. And a year later, in 2012, it emerged and it hit the mainstream news that this guy had been a serial paedophile and procurer of children for the British establishment for decades. He'd been in the employ of the BBC for 50-odd years, and it emerged that he'd been actually sexually abusing children on BBC premises in his dressing room, paid for by the license fee, which is this tax that's passed on to the British people to fund the BBC. And then you start to delve further into the story, and you realise that Savile was a close personal friend of the British royal family. Well, they call them British, they're German, really. But, you know, the Queen, Prince Philip, Prince Charles were personal friends with Jimmy Savile. He was personal friends with at least two prominent prime ministers. And research has shown that he was actually procuring kids from so-called care homes and children's homes and such, and making them available to this parliamentary paedophile ring consisting of prominent MPs and such, and leading all the way back to Buckingham Palace, the home of the Queen, the royal family. But of course, this is stuff that you've only been able to read in the alternative media because the mainstream won't go near it. But,
sure. It reminds me of a case we had here with Boys Town. There's a book called The Conspiracy of Silence that touches on this same sort of underground pedophile ring, and it's as sick as it gets, Mark. Absolutely sick. Mark, where can people find your work before the conference? And we'll let you go. I know it's late there.
Okay, well, yeah, no problem. My work is all accessible via my main site, which is markdevlin.co.uk. There's a link there to my YouTube channel, which is Mark Devlin TV. That's the suffix there. Also on my SoundCloud page, I've got all my editions so far of The Sound of Freedom, which is the conscious music show that I do. And that is music that articulates so much of what's going to be at the conference, really, what people are going to be talking about, the points that are going to be under discussion. All of that is being addressed by a whole bunch of artists out there. Again, it's stuff you don't expect to see on MTV. I know that you're feeling a lot of conscious reggae, so I'll get inside that, and some soulful, uplifting stuff as well. So that show is called The Sound of Freedom, and that's available on the SoundCloud page. Also, I do a series called Good Vibrations, which is conversations, just like this, really, where I'll get guests on and talk about a whole bunch of alternative subjects, from spirituality to conspiracy to truth, all kinds of aspects there. And just before I go, Bob, I just want to say many thanks to yourself and for John for getting me onto this conference, because it's a great privilege for me. I'm greatly looking forward to coming out to Philly and being a part of it. I did an event called the Glastonbury Symposium in the UK in summer this year, which was my biggest talk so far. And it's just a great privilege and a great honor to be among some of the amazing guests you've got lined up there. You've definitely got some big dogs of the scene, you know, and very, very grateful to be a part of that. I also want to say a big thanks to Ivan from Phoenix, because he's the guy that set the ball rolling and, you know, put me on to John. So I'm definitely looking forward to being a part of it. And what you were saying about just being among like-minded people and just vibing with folk that are on the same wavelength as you, that cannot be underestimated. It's a wonderful thing, and synchronicity tends to come into your life in those sort of situations.
It certainly does. It certainly does.
Let's give a shout out to Ivan for his help. He's definitely been doing a lot behind the scenes. He definitely did line this up too.
Yeah, really.
Absolutely. All right, Mark. Well, thank you so much again for coming on tonight. We know it's late there, but again, we look forward to seeing you at the conference, and take care, okay?
Thanks for getting me on.
All right, not a problem. Bye-bye.